My name is Lassey and I'm a chaplain for CVA, Christian Venues Australia. I have 6 children, 10 grandchildren, 2 on the way, and I'm living in Henley Brook at the moment. The first time I think I really heard the gospel that made a lot of sense was I was on my way to Darwin. I came from Melbourne, but I had got mixed up with the wrong crowd, done a lot of things I shouldn't have done, and I was running. And I ran in my car. I drove up to Queensland, and then from Queensland I went up to Darwin. And while I was in Darwin, on my way to Darwin, I picked up some hitchhikers because I was all alone. And these 2 hitchhikers talked about Jesus for 23 hours in my car. And we argued, and I said, what about children born blind? What about this, what about starving people? What about? And they couldn't give me absolute answers for everything, but they made sense, and I knew they were being honest, and obviously what they were saying was really moving me in my heart. Right, so I stayed in Darwin for a winter, then I met a guy and rode his motorbike down to Perth. Took 3 weeks to do that. A good year's gone by and my world's falling apart. Everything on the outside looks fantastic, but on the inside it was falling apart. And I had to go back to Melbourne to deal with what I'd run away from. And on the way there I said to God, I'll do anything, just get me out of this. I don't want to go to jail. I do not want to go down that way. I want to come back to Perth. And so I prayed and I told God there was 5 things I thought I'd like to do, and of those 5 things, one of them, the last one, was to be a nanny that would give me a little bit of responsibility, because I was getting every time I got a job, and I could get a job, I could walk into a job, I'm a hairdresser, and I could walk in and I could do something lovely and get a job, but then after a bit of time, as the time went by, if something happened I didn't like, I'd just leave because I could, and I was just getting really irresponsible. So the night I came back from Melbourne, I did get out of what I had to go to the police for. That actually did get pushed aside, and I got back to Perth, and I was sitting in the Hay Street Mall, and there was a half circle of people, and they were singing about Jesus, and I'm looking and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that girl on the end, she's got what those guys in Darwin had. And she was beaming. She was just really, really happy and smiling, and she wasn't drunk and she wasn't stoned and she wasn't plastic, she was just real. And then another lady came and spoke to me, and she told me about her life, which was just like she was telling me about my life. And I thought, that's what I need. Time went by. After that, I went for an interview for a job where I got to look after some children as a nanny, 2 of those still in nappies and a 4-year-old, and so I took on the position of nanny. And 3 weeks later I went finally to one of these concerts that I'd been invited to, where I just loved it, and that night I gave my heart to Jesus, and it was nothing I could have dreamt of. In all of my wildest imagination, nobody could have told me how good it would be. And nobody said to me that night, now you stop taking drugs, stop smoking, stop drinking, stop. Nobody said anything, but I just knew I wasn't going to do drugs anymore, because what I felt that night was so amazing. It was like, this is feeling good, and all the drugs and everything else is just a counterfeit for what God really wants to do for us. I also stopped smoking that day. That was the 31st of May 1981. Haven't even wanted a cigarette since then. And because of my history with drinking, because I'd done bar work and all types of things, and I had become a lot did a lot of drinking, I completely stopped. And nobody told me to, I just stopped. And everything changed. Well, I went back to the guy with the 3 children after the weekend, and I've turned into an instant Bible basher. And he was like, oh my gosh, she's looking after my children. Well, you know, what's she going to do while I'm at work? And he's off at night shift, and I'm taking his kids to church with me, and I'm taking them to Bible studies, and I'm taking them to this group and that group. And so the week later he came along just to make sure that it wasn't a cult and I wasn't going to, you know, put his kids on a sacrificial altar or whatever, because a lot of stuff was happening in those days. Anyway, he came along. He was not looking for God. There is no such thing as God. He was a very bitter, angry young man. And he sat on his hands so that he couldn't put his hand up to accept Jesus. And he thought, bunch of idiots, every time somebody did receive Jesus. But anyway, long story short, God got hold of him, and he found himself down on the floor crying and weeping and finding out that there really is a God and that he really does care, and he really cares about every little tiny detail. And so a year later, I married my boss, and we became, I'd like to say, lived happily ever after, but well, we had the ingredients to make happily ever after. And we've been married for 35 years, and we had 3 more children after the first 3, and life wasn't always easy. My husband became a pastor, and we've pastored for about 26 years of that time, and now we're chaplains, and loving it. Still love Jesus, love him more now than ever. I tried so many things before I tried Jesus, and they all lasted 3 months, 6 months, and then wore off. But no, Jesus is the real thing. He's the missing part that was missing in my life, and when I asked him into my heart, I became whole. And yeah, he's awesome. So, we are chaplains for Christian Venues Australia. Christian Venues Australia is a association that takes care of the Christian camps. A good example is Bustleton, all along Geograph Bay there. There's a lot of Christian camps. They join CVA, and then CVA does a lot of things for them, but one of the things they do is they supply a chaplain. We don't go to the camps for the camp's sake, we go for the managers and their staff. So twice a year we visit each WA camp, sometimes more often, and at least twice a year, call them up. But we tend to see them a lot more than that. There is a couple that we've seen on much more regular because they've had needs and needed. One of the camps got completely burnt out, and so we were able to be there for the managers of that. And we also have been really blessed to be able to camp sit a couple of times, and that's not part of our role, it's just something we were able to do. So we camp sat one of the Bustleton camps just prior to Christmas, where they were going to get so totally flat out, and they knew it. And we had a Christmas lunch down there and invited them all along, and then talking to this couple said, look, take some days off and we'll take care of it till you come back, and then when you're busy at Christmas you're refreshed. And they did that, and we loved it. It was so much fun, and they had a nice break, and it was just lovely, and we just did that voluntarily. And then we looked after another camp over Christmas where there was no people there. This was a camp where they have schools and groups, only schools and groups, but we just looked after the property and the animals, because there was horses and all kinds of like almost a farm of animals there, and so we just fed all the animals every day and looked after them and kept the place nice while they were away. And now we've got 4 months in Bustleton looking after the Baptist camp while the managers take their long service leave, and it's actually a voluntary position, so they're very careful who they choose to find out that that person or that couple are going to be available to do that. And because it's voluntary, but it's very, very fulfilling and enjoyable. And it's actually a friend of ours that we invited in Adelaide while we were there to be the chaplains for the South Australian camps, and it's somebody that we know that's just got a heart for that type of, you know, the heart to help people and just loves to, you know, help people. We've pastored for many years. This is very different. The chaplain's the good guy, you know. We're not the disciplinarian or anything. We're the listener, we're the encourager, and there's not really a lot of negatives to that because it's a lovely thing to do, just to listen, and sometimes that's all we do is just listen.